to another edition of www.mtowntonight.com. And as we've been talking about and advertising throughout the week, he's here now. We've finally got the opportunity to connect both worlds, and Judge Joe Brown needs really no introduction. But those of you that are not familiar with Judge Brown was one of the top, if not the top, show of court TV shows on television, and he actually was in Memphis here and was a presiding judge over the appeal of the James Earl Ray case, if I'm saying that correctly,
right.
sir. Uh-huh. As well as the first African American prosecutor here in our city.
Also, I ran the public defender's office, but that's been a long time ago.
There you go. There you go. So without further ado, we're going to get off into it with Brother Brown. If I may say once again, my pleasure to have you here, sir.
All right, Mr. Darney, the judge is in the house.
All right, great.
Let's go rock it.
One of the first things I wanted to talk to you about, Brother Brown, is not too long ago here you ran through the election for the Attorney General through against Amy Weinrich, and a lot of us, including myself and other people that I'm familiar with and associate with, were supporters of you and voters for you, and we were disappointed on how things turned out. I, as well as other people that I know and communicate with, were kind of taken aback as to why we didn't know as to how things went or why things went.
Oh, you want an explanation for that?
Yes, sir.
Well, there's an organization called Black Box Inc. They're going around the country and they are looking into stuff where there is voter fraud, but not the kind that you hear from the GOP.
Yes,
with this, Shelby County, Tennessee, you have candidate numbers in the machines, not the candidate's name. So it's me and the individual Wyrick were running, but there were 5 numbers in there. So there are 36,000 votes scattered between
correct
3 numbers that have nothing to do with anybody that was running.
Yes, sir.
So technically I was supposed to have gotten about 70-some% of that vote, but it's been a bad thing here in Shelby County. And since not 19, but 2008, there's been money in the bank that the feds have put in here to replace every one of these machines. They're Diebold machines.
Yes, sir.
And this is the only county, along with one other in the United States, that still uses them. They're based on Windows 2000 technology. There's no firewall, no security.
Yes.
There's no way to update them. The programming was not what was provided by the factory, but by somebody that had Republican Party leanings down here in in Arkansas. And all it takes to replace them is a simple majority resolution by the county commission. But for some reason, over the last 9 years, every time it's come up, you get at least 3 Democrats, usually black, who say, no, we don't need to do that, even though the money's there.
Yes, sir. Yes.
And then you've got 1 or 2 people running around saying it's up to the election commission, which it is not. By Tennessee law, it's up to the county commission.
Yes, sir.
So again, same old, same old. You've got a situation where you're getting a majority black population that is being run by a minority.
Yes, sir.
It's reversed. And right now, Memphis is the largest majority black city in the United States.
Wow.
As a matter of fact, to show you how awful it's gotten, only 19.1% of the registered voters in this city are white. But you see what's happened with the offices.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
But that's a prelude to what's going to happen across the country in the next 25 to 30 years. The Census Bureau is predicting that in 25 years or so, the country will no longer be a majority white country. That's happened in Hawaii, where there is no majority, and in California, where now 52 to 54% of the population is Hispanic.
Yes,
it makes a difference in the way politics runs.
I think I would say so.
So we're going to see some changes on the horizon with this. Now, right now, one of the problems that we do have in this country is there is a lack of effective black leadership on a national level.
Yes, sir.
There's very little on the local level, but I am glad to see that there are some of the younger people that are trying to get involved. They're working themselves up. They're going through the same stages we went through in the 60s of anger and trying to investigate, to get into the theory of the thing and see
Yes, sir.
where they're going. And I hope they will be a bit more energized and radical than they have been.
Yes. Now,
And
if I may just
yes,
briefly ask the question with regard to the Diebold machines. Considering that I'm sure everyone in dealing with the elections here in the city have some idea or are knowledgeable as you about these machines, and the money has been available to get new machines, and we are only, that's, you say, two of many counties
there are
or
only
such,
two in the whole United
two in the whole
States.
United
This one in
States
Haywood that's still
that are
using.
using these machines, and there are issues with these machines.
They have been for years.
What I mean,
There
how
hasn't
can
been a
we?
straight up election in this county since about 2000.
Wow.
The situation is so bad that California, that used to use them, actually dumped them in the Pacific Ocean, and they've issued an instruction booklet to discourage the continued use of these machines that show you how to hack them. You don't. All you need to hack them is a iPhone, Android, iPad, something like that. And what you basically do is you type out a message to a third party with the technical details, and when you get within 5 feet or so of the machines, you press send. It's picked up by the card reading slot.
Yes, sir.
And you hack that machine, and in 10 minutes you've hacked every machine in the precinct, and then within 45 minutes to an hour you control every machine in the system.
Mm. Now, you ran against Amy Winery, and throughout the election, you were speaking, as well as before the election, you were talking about prosecutorial misconduct on her behalf. And as of lately here, she was, I think, exonerated of charges or something like that.
She hasn't been exonerated. She hasn't been exonerated. There was a series of charges that came out of a fixed homicide case brought by the family members of the victim that was serving time for murder of her mother.
Okay.
And you've had a scandal with what's now about 18,000 untested rape kits. There were 12, but now it turns out 18,000.
Yes, sir.
Since the statute of limitations has been modified. And what went on is a family friend of the Wyricks, who is a United Methodist preacher from Jackson, Tennessee, had left a sperm sample in the vagina of the deceased woman. That was analyzed, and his DNA was all over the house, so that got suppressed.
Yes, sir.
And they coerced a confession out of the young. Well, they didn't. Well, anyway, they didn't even really do that. But the Supreme Court of the state set the conviction aside. They offered her a sweetheart deal. You'll get out of jail in 2 weeks if you cop out to involuntary manslaughter. And I think, hell, I want to get out of jail. I think it went that way, but there's a lot more to it. So what's going on is between the DA's office and the juvenile court here, they're using those two instruments to suppress the people in this area. Poor whites and basically blacks. Juvenile court has become completely privatized, and it is using that to make money generated by doing some very atrocious things to young black males. This area of town right here is right down from Germantown. I've got a situation right down the street from me where there is a white family, black family. They both had kids that were in high school. Both of them went to the same high school. One black, one's white. They picked up another white kid. They were riding around. They got stopped. Nobody has a record. They took the two white kids to Germantown City Court. The matter was resolved within 30 days, not even a pat on the wrist. They kept the young black kid. They took him down to juvenile court. That's been going on for more than a year. Families out more than $5,000 or $6,000 when they're trying to ruin this kid. He was sitting in the back, two kids in the front. they'd smoked a little reefer. They found a couple of roaches in the ashtray when they got pulled over, but they let the white kids go, took the black kid down there, jacking him up. That's typical.
Yes, sir.
54% of the juveniles in the adult system in the state of Tennessee come out of Shelby County, and 95% of them are black.
Mm.
Now, speaking of which, we get into this other thing, marijuana.
Sir.
Right now, you've got this scam being run. Wyrick's office is running these statistics to the Department of Justice, and Sessions, who is no friend of ours, who is the new U.S. Attorney General,
yes,
he's using those to declare Memphis a target area for drug enforcement. And basically what you're seeing is in Shelby County, even though the overwhelming majority of the people here are black,
yes,
the arrest ratio is running about 50-50 white and black for simple possession of marijuana, but 95% of the prosecutions are black. You see, a disproportionate thing. So they are, according to the Department of Justice's last report, Memphis Shelby County gives out the stiffest sentences in the whole United States of America for simple possession of marijuana.
Wow.
So it's a methodology of controlling African Americans. Now,
but if we've got African American, for an interruption, but if we've got African American people in this city, attorneys, city council, people that are in positions of power that can really do something about that, or do we not have that? Is it just a smoke screen?
We don't. See, first qualification, you got to have balls.
Okay.
You've got some people that have not the cojones necessary. You have a few exceptions, but you have some sellouts. They are trying to become modern day house Negroes, and my analysis of Memphis generally is it's a large plantation, but the Negroes have no cotton to pick, and the so-called leadership is fighting with some white folk to be the plantation overseers over the plantation that has no cotton for the Negroes to pick.
Wow. Well, is it because it's beneficial for them to leave that blind eye?
Well, it's like a method of manipulation. So you have to understand what the criminal justice system has become anyway. It's not really fighting crime. It's controlling surplus labor. And this country, outside of all of the rest of the civilized world, has no plan to integrate its displaced workers into the economy in the face of industrial technology and computerization. So what happens is everybody keeps getting knocked down a notch.
Yes, sir.
Every 4, 5 to 10 years, and their expectations aren't what they are. And within the jobs that pay a meaningful compensation for what you're doing, there's intense competition. So guess what? We have what I call the one block identification rule. We are easy to pick out at a distance by either features or color.
Yes, sir.
Or style. And what they use the criminal justice system for is to control surplus labor. If you think of labor like a commodity like wheat, corn, or cotton,
yes,
when you get a glut, there are 3 things you do. You cut back production, store the surplus, and subsidize the producer. The subsidies, the welfare check. The storage facility is a jail cell instead of a grain silo, and the cutting back production is the encouragement of nonsense where the kids drop out, bang out, drug out, get inappropriate lifestyles, get pregnant too early, too often, do not have education or training, and they're unemployable. They get put down through the system. When they get a felony, then they become employable. Everybody nowadays on the employment applications wants to know if you got a drug problem, so you intensify the prosecutions for drugs. You've got this thing Sessions is doing out of D.C., Wyrick is doing out of here, a concerted effort to go out and try to have a saturation.
Are we getting ready to get back to like it was in the 90s with the mass incarceration?
That's what the deal is, and Sessions looks like he's trying to revive the war on drugs, which is exercise in futility. But you see, that's the mechanism that they're using to control us politically, socially, and economically. So it is a very bad thing that we have here. And with juvenile court stuck in this mix,
yes,
where it's privatized. They make money off of every kid they lock
It
up.
was it was under my understanding that they had basically sold all of the accounts, if you want to call them that, to the company of Maximus, which is out on Mendenhall.
Yeah. See, that's the thing. It's privatized, so it's private business.
Okay.
And we've got this mayor,
Strickland,
the clown, whose idea is to get the Justice Department to back off of this edict that they put the juvenile court under, and they're saying we don't need it. Oh, the devil! Yeah. That thing needs to be in place because it is a cesspool down there.
They just recently had a vote on that as well.
Yeah, the city council, under the leadership of one or two of the few black leaders we have here, suppressed that, and they're studying it. I hope they sit there and sit on juvenile court because it's a mess. Now, the reason it's a mess is because of what happens historically. The last slave auction in the United States was held at Shelby County Juvenile Court in 1962.
Wow.
They had a woman as a juvenile court judge, and she was literally selling kids. Now, it wasn't always with black kids, but she was auctioning them off with the money going to her, selling the kids' babies to Hollywood stars and celebrities and VIP types around the world. Now, it was a big scandal, so they wound up replacing him with a person with no background in juvenile justice. It was a person named Kenny Turner, who was running the Vice Squad.
Judge Turner, as we
Kenneth Turner. Now, I refuse to use that name.
Okay.
The reason being is he was a 6th grade dropout, so he did not go into the 7th grade. Well, yeah, he started 7th grade, but he dropped out of the 7th grade, so the furthest grade he's ever completed is the 6th grade. So he
was classified as a judge.
He was judge, but for the 30 years out of that, 50-some years he was down there, he was not permitted to hear cases because of his educational deficiencies. So he had the job, he got the full pay. Hell, he's making the same thing I was, but he come down there 2 days out of the week. And see, he couldn't hear cases, which is how they had to hire all of these referees who are nothing but attorneys. They're not elected. They call them now magistrates, but whereas every other magistrate in this county has to be unanimously approved by the circuit, chancery, and criminal court judges. With juvenile court, they were letting somebody that was an illiterate, basically, with a 7th grade dropout status, he was picking his own. So they ran juvenile court, and because they had Curtis Persons, who was on the state Senate Judiciary Committee, what he was doing was getting more power for juvenile court. So now they deal with adults and such things as child support coming out of divorces and that kind of thing. So they've expanded their jurisdiction, which is a shame because it has given them more opportunity to mess up families.
I wanted to ask you, in consideration of us talking about juvenile, now, initially when, and this is going back to the election as well, initially when it was found out, or when we realized to a degree that you were running, you were representing someone pro bono in juvenile.
Yes.
Would you enlighten us?
Well, you want to know what that was about?
Would you please?
Okay, here's what it was about. See, I have some of the absolute worst horror stories I have out of 40-some years of practicing law, being a judge or an arbitrator, which is what I was doing on TV.
Yes, sir.
Come out of juvenile court. The first time I appeared there, more than 40 years ago, that fool called me the N-word. He thought I was on his docket, so we tangled.
Okay.
All right. Now, when I walked in there, I did not anticipate running into this woman, but she appealed to me, and I had to do something about it because it was a travesty and a miscarriage of justice.
Yes, sir.
I discovered some things when I was trying to help her. First off, I had issued a direct order when I was on the bench that the last time I checked was in full force and effect. And as soon as I walked back there, I saw that they were violating it. They had all of these adult defendants who had been brought in from the penal farm, who were serving time on other matters and were brought in to deal with tag-in child support cases. And they had all of them grouped into this one room that was about 6 feet wide and about 20 feet long, and there are police standing around listening to them being interrogated by the lawyers. I had ordered that to stop.
Yes.
They were telling them things that I had ordered to stop 20 years before, and they were violating the law. So I'm getting hot.
Yes.
Next thing, the case with this woman is this. She's not a young woman. She has one child who is a son. The son's grown.
Yes.
Son's doing fine. College graduate. Some 30 years ago, she had dated somebody, and this person turned into a stalker. Now, this person finds out she's still in the Memphis area. He comes through town to visit some relatives. And what he does at this point, which is 10, 12 years ago, he walks in off the street and says, she's the mother of my daughter. Now, she has never had a daughter. She's collected no child support from anybody for anything on any child. He's never paid a dime, but they let him go in and start charges against her. They bring her in. She's arrested. They process the matter. Do you have any children? I have only one. It's a son. I have no daughter. All right. You ever made a claim against anybody? Never made a claim. Case is dismissed. 5 years later, this fool finds out that it's been dismissed, walks in. They start the whole thing all over again. They never serve her nothing. It's already been disposed of. She doesn't find out about this until she's a college grad and she gets a lucrative position. And they do a background check. And they say, well, you've got this warrant. What warrant? Juvenile court. What? Whoa.
Yeah.
So she goes in there to see about it. They've already handled the doggone thing. Their records are so tacky. Yeah. They don't care. And the bottom line is they've issued a warrant, and under Tennessee law, to issue a valid warrant, somebody has to swear to it. Somebody has to set forth the facts that allow an independent magistrate to say, or judge to say, all right, probable cause has been established here. Okay. There's no affidavit of complaint. Nothing's been sworn to. Somebody rubber stamped the signature. Somebody rubber stamped the signature on a warrant, and some file clerk issued a warrant for this woman's arrest. So why is she in court? This fool, Harold Horn, who is nothing but a referee to start off with. He was hired right after law school by Turner because they're family friends. He is a magistrate. He is a crank. They call him Dirty Harry because he doesn't have time except to run a thing on all these black people and poor whites coming through there. He's a terror and he's a racist and he needs to be gone. So he starts talking down to me. And, of course, I go off.
Sure.
But, it was nothing worse than happens in my courtroom or on TV. You see it sometimes or in reality, or that I've done or other lawyers have done. And, of course, down there, they're so delicate. They're so above everyone that we can't have this stuff.
Yeah.
So I wound up getting the woman's case taken care of. But, I mean, it's like, just say you married, right?
Yes, sir.
Okay, just imagine if you found out somebody had come in and, your wife gets arrested. What happened? And somebody said, well, she's the mother of somebody's daughter. Well, you didn't tell me about this.
Yeah.
See, so you got a married woman. She's got a happy home. She's only had one child. That's the son that mom and dad raised and who's a college graduate. She doesn't want him to find out. She doesn't want hubby to find out.
Right.
So here are these clowns down there. Just let somebody walk in off the street. Doesn't even have to swear to it. They wind up issuing a warrant for her arrest.
Well,
the second time.
Okay.
So see, that's what was going on down there, and that's the way they treat people. Now, just a couple of brief episodes of horror stories. One time there was a situation.
Well, if I may ask,
go ahead.
With regards to that. Because people thought that on your end that was a publicity stunt to get
No, it wasn't
garner
publicity
to
stunt.
garner people to get
No,
involved and
get
interested.
that little trash place down there that needs to be broken down brick by brick.
Yeah.
It got what they do routinely down there in a case called Severe versus Turner, which was heard by the Sixth Circuit Court of Appeals.
Yes, sir.
That's federal.
Yes, sir.
And that's been more than 30 years ago. They said if you file a lawsuit against them and claim and prove what they've been doing, everybody down there is personally liable in damages to the plaintiff because no judge or legal system can do what they were doing down there. They act as judge, jury, they act as the police entity. You don't find Department of Human Services people down there. They work for the judge on a contract to represent the Department of Human Services. Child Protective Services, that's not them. That's somebody working for the judge. The defenders down there did not work for the Shelby County Public Defender's Office until they got in some more trouble recently to transfer them over. The prosecutors did not work for the DA's office. They worked for the judge. And the judge at that time had a personal contract with the county to prosecute child support violations.
Now you have situations where you have mothers that white mothers that are going to child support court or juvenile, but I would be safe to say it's predominantly black, right?
Well, here's what the problem is. You see, they have concurrent jurisdiction with circuit and chancery court. So let's say that what happens if you're white and you have money, you go through and get a divorce from your wife, or your wife divorces you, there's child support. They go to circuit or chancery court where it's dignified, and everything's handled right.
Yes, sir.
Well, what happens with juvenile court is they pick the black ones and poor whites. They've got the same divorce. So instead of going to circuit court, where you've got a child support order in effect, you find your summons down to juvenile court. And it's a kangaroo court where they have no protections by due process or anything. You're not dealt with by a judge, as the state constitution says, an elected judge. Yes. You're dealt with somebody he appoints. See, so they've got this big, huge operation, and instead of having, and see, this is the other thing, there are 2 juvenile court judges authorized, but they have quashed that for years, so there's only one, and that one runs a whole system instead of just presiding over a court.
Yes, sir.
So in other words, he's just a general sessions judge.
Okay.
But instead of doing what every other general sessions judge does, which is presiding over a courtroom where he hears the cases, he, through the predecessor Turner and then Curtis Persons, what you wind up with is a situation where the judge has all these lawyers he's hired to hear the cases, and all he does is review this stuff.
Yes, sir.
See, it's not a court of record where that is appropriate. It's just a general sessions, which is the lowest level court in the state of Tennessee other than a municipal court. Okay. And municipal courts now are confined to basically traffic matters. So that's what you're dealing with. So instead of you getting the full panoply of legal protection and due process that you would if you were in any other county in Tennessee, in this one you get a general sessions judge who's not even going to be hearing your case. It's some lawyers he hired that don't have to go through any qualifications thing. It's just on his own sole discretion.
Because you've got so many people, and I'll be the first one to say that I've been a victim of juvenile court.
Hey, that's a good word for it.
I've been a victim of, and there are plenty of men out here that are victims of juvenile court for not having the proper documents. You make payments, and you have payments that are taken out of your check. You can't find out where your money is being applied, or they give you credit for it, say that you paid it, but nobody knows who got it. All types of stuff is going on with juvenile court.
People ought to be going to a federal penitentiary.
All types of stuff is going on with juvenile court.
Up here in Pennsylvania, they sent 4 judges to the penitentiary for doing the same thing they do routinely down here. Now, here's the thing. This is where the game plan went in. I saw this develop. See, I didn't like them. I used to be the public defender. And
do you have any allies in the city that would stand with you?
No, none of them got balls anymore. But the bottom line is this. See, my second my first law partner wound up being the public defender after me, Ural Adams, late Ural Adams.
Okay.
So what happened is they had Ruby Wharton, who is the mayor's wife, and they had DeArmey Bailey, the late DeArmey Bailey, former judge. They were assigned there as the assistant public defenders. They won so many cases that Turner banned them from coming down there, and he set up his own little thing where he had cronies. So what happened is I filed a habeas corpus challenging the conviction they got on some people down there.
Mm-hmm.
And the circuit court judge says, well, how do you pay these people? They didn't have any means to show that there was any fund or anything they had to pay these so-called appointed attorneys. So I won the habeas corpus. Well, the next one I filed, and I wasn't charging anybody for this, this was just a freebie, pro bono, because it's wrong what they do. So the next one, it developed that they had been allocated, I think it was $28,000 by the county commission to pay lawyers. Well, okay. The next one after that came up. Then the next one, it was a year later, the county commission had given them $50,000. So that's $78,000, but they'd only paid out $3,000 for an attorney payout.
Okay.
So it built up. So then you get several $100,000. Then we saw $1 million. Then it got up to $3.5 million. And by then I'd been elected. This is in 1990.
Okay.
So they've got $3.5 million in this fund that they're supposed to be paying appointed counsel out of.
Yes, sir.
But they weren't. So what happens is this fund became a slush fund. Now, when Shep Wilburn got, to the surprise of many, appointed by the county commission to take over the clerk's position down there at juvenile court, I had Randy Wade. I called him up. I called up the late
former chef Randy Wade. Right?
Yeah.
Okay.
I called up the late Judge Otis Higgs, and I said, look, do me a favor, swear in Shep Wilburn tonight instead of waiting for that ceremony. So this Judge Higgs did that. Randy Wade, who was still with the sheriff's department, formed up a goon squad. They went down to juvenile court, seized all the records that they discovered they were trying to sneak out and put on a flatbed truck.
Wow.
So when we got it, we found that they had a slush fund that they were using to finance personal cars, campaigns, and such like, and homes. And we thought it was $6.5 million. But it turned out to be 8.3 million. So I got to look at it and saw the crookedness. Who had been signing off, which was the clerk of the court and the judge down there, Turner. So they now have a fund that's worth about $20-some million, but they're using it to finance Republican and
it's still a slush fund,
slush fund, conservative political interest. Now, here's the bad part about it. They are running a game on the women in this county. The money that is collected for child support doesn't go directly to the woman. Some of them say, well, I don't want to go through circuit court and get my lawyer. I'm just going to go to juvenile court. But what happens is if you went to circuit court, the husband would pay in and the woman could come in within a week, either get it sent to her or pick it up, and there would be her money. At juvenile court, they keep it for 14 to 18 months in an account, generate interest on it. The interest goes to this slush fund that's in a sequestered non-interest bearing account, which is illegal.
Right.
And then what they wind up doing is she gets the money, but there's a 14 to 18 month delay from the time they get it from the father to the time she gets it.
And circuit court doesn't operate that way.
Doesn't operate that way. They do it immediately. So does Chancery.
Now, does it matter if, I'm assuming you have to be married to deal with circuit court?
That's right.
Yes, sir.
Okay, but see, the problem is now they're getting people that have child support issues that are resulting from a divorce, not just where the child's born out of wedlock.
Okay.
So that's bad. So another thing that I have picked up on, and this involves even attorneys. Wife says, baby, do you know they're taking $280 out of your check? Well, that's FICA. No, that's not FICA. What is this? And then they go, well, what? Child support? Well, their child is 36 years old and they've got grandchildren, But juvenile court has been taking the money out of this guy's check since the child hit 18,
Yes.
when they're supposed to stop.
Right.
The mother didn't get any money. The child didn't get any money. The child has been outside of the range for 18 to 20 years. Juvenile court still taking it, and they don't want to give it back, and they can't explain where it went. See, they keep doing that.
And I can attest to that exact circumstance myself. I went through that myself.
Well, see, that's what they're doing. They're robbing this county blind, and they ought to go to jail. But they can't because the DA's in there protecting them. Now, let me tell you some horror stories. Ural Adams and I tried this case. Actually, he was the main counsel, and I was helping him. And this woman, who was a nurse at John Gaston Hospital at the time, had been found slaughtered. She was dead. So they brought in 3 juveniles, and they kept them in for interrogation. They didn't let them sleep, didn't let them eat for 72 straight hours, and they got confessions out of them. Well, what happens is the former judge, Judge William Williams, a fine judge, said, oh no. He set the conviction aside. So the story that the state had as their facts was that these 3 boys supposedly took the victim out, strangled her with one of her stockings, and raped her. Well, what came out in trial was she didn't get strangled by stockings. She got strangled by a length of surgical rubber tubing. She had a precise midline incision that was done with a scalpel, and somebody removed her ovaries. And what went on was she had been dating a doctor at this place who had been just going off about her, putting him down and starting to date a new resident. So she had become involved with him, and what it looked like was this doctor had done it.
Yes, sir.
And the doctor was being protected, and they were trying to scapegoat these kids. So the guy that Ural represented and that I insisted in the representation of, he's free man, but they kept the rest of them in a penitentiary until they turned 21 years old. And they covered for this doctor. He's now dead, but that's been a while ago.
Yes,
another case I had down there, just typical of what's going on. There was this woman, she's white. Fine looking woman. She owned 3 dry cleaning businesses, and she had a black employee that was helping her run the business. So she was observed to have gone to lunch with him on a couple occasions.
Yes, sir.
Well, there were 2 white police families that wanted to adopt the kid. So she had a daughter and a son, blonde haired, blue eyed, fine kids. And I ran into them 2 years ago. They came up to me, and they're 40 years old and late 30s now. Said, thank you for doing what you did. Took me a while. They had to explain. I said, you, wow. They were little kids at the time. You know, you get old. But anyway, what happened is they wound up trying to get these kids. They terminated this woman's parental rights, and the only thing that they had got on her was going to lunch with this black guy. So they had her going to see a psychiatrist for a whole year and a half, paying this guy $80 an hour to talk to her. And what his motive was to take the kids away from her so these 2 police families could adopt her kids. So anyway, they wound up doing it, but the kids started going nuts. One of them burned down one of the cops' houses. I went back in, and I had to wind up going through an appellate process to get these kids back to mama. She had been terminated of her parental rights for no reason. She wound up being appointed a guardian. The kids grew up, but they still tell me they've got scars. They talked to me. I ran into them at a restaurant 2 years ago, and they were saying thanks. It was just pure hell. That's not the worst story.
And this is all Shelby County.
Shelby County, yeah. And then another one that was really awful. This guy had a secret into some of the car dealerships. He put some money in there, but he's black, so you know, he couldn't come out in the open in those days. So he had a daughter with this woman that he had gone to high school with. But he ran into her one night when he was a little drunk, and she was a prostitute. She got preggo. She claimed it was his. He fessed up. Well, he had to get, you know, starts raising, paying the money. So the mother was a prostitute. She lived in a place and it was just unseemly. So she had several kids. I go down and I wound up getting then Russell Sugarman, who was one of the few referees
that Tarek Sugarman?
His father.
His father, okay.
He wound up awarding my client custody of the child. So here's what happens. This child from kindergarten through 10th grade got straight A's. Absolute perfect straight A record. For the 11th grade, she wasn't going to have to go to high school because Harvard, Yale, Vassar, Princeton, Stanford all were offering her full scholarships. Starting in college in the 11th grade.
The 10th grade to the 11th grade.
Yeah, well, the mother was in the penitentiary. The mother gets out of the penitentiary, goes to juvenile court. Veronica Coleman was the referee at the time. Okay. I had just been elected to the bench. I participated in the celebration, the send-off party. They took her to the airport. She gets on the plane. Everybody thinks, but nobody hears from her for several days. Juvenile court, thanks to Coleman, had sent somebody down there, pulled the girl off of the airplane, taking her into custody. I can't represent anybody anymore because I'm sitting on the criminal bench.
Yes, sir.
What happens is the girl is put into the mother's home. She doesn't get to go to college in the 11th grade. The woman's pimp rapes her, gets her impregnated. She has this kid and then shoots herself in the head out of grief some months later. Wow. That's the kind of juvenile court situation. One time I was representing this policeman, black cop. There's a request for an increase in child support. We go down to juvenile court. They call the kid's name out. My client stands up, I stand up, another lawyer stands up, another man stands up, a third man stands up, third man's lawyer stands up. All three men have been paying child support on this kid for 14 years.
Whoa.
They won't let us get a paternity test
to determine
it. We do it secretly. None of the three is the daddy. All right.
Where's the money?
They didn't want to let him off, so we had to go to the appellate courts. Another somebody to find an individual, an engineer. His paperwork showed that when he was still in high school, they told him he would be arrested if he did not sign off on this. He put it down, I am not the father, but I've been told I'd be arrested if I didn't sign this before I left. Anyway, it comes back, we have to snake to get a DNA test once they invent these things.
Yes.
Turns out he's not the daddy, but they won't let him stop. They won't allow him to stop paying child support, so it has to go to the appellate courts. See, that kind of thing. And that judge down there, Turner, that sick soul, used to go on camera, used to give interviews to the press cemetery all the time, that he's setting up a coalition between poor black women and conservative whites to run the county by ruining black families, particularly the black men who are getting out of their place. It need to be put on a short lease. This is the way we can control the county, and they've been doing it. Like when Otis Higgs ran for mayor, they came out that it was the father of this child, but it wasn't. It was a complaint a woman made. Somebody else was found to be the person responsible for the paternity.
Yeah.
They had the late Wythe Chandler, who was a judge. They had 2 children that they were putting on him, blackmailing him when he was the mayor.
Yes, sir.
Now, once the kids got grown, and he was a circuit court judge, he unloaded on them. Several times when I was practicing law 30 years ago, the judge said, if you don't change this, I'm closing the place down within the next hour. When I was a judge on the criminal bench, the sheriff of the county filed a habeas on behalf of 200 some inmates he had. They were non-compos mentis with guardians, and juvenile court had locked them up indefinitely until they paid purge payments.
So where do we go? How can we put an end to this or begin to put an end to this when you've got people that are voting to actually stop what I classify as the investigation into what's going on down there?
Well, it's not the people. This is the mayor. The same mayor that says the solution to our problems with our kids not getting education and training is to buy laptops so they can play games, or to have more basketball for them, or to take John P. Freeman, which is probably, it's a magnet school,
Yes, sir.
probably has some of the best behaved and smartest black kids in the city going. He wants to set up a tennis program to keep them out of trouble. They don't need to be kept out of trouble.
Yes, sir.
You see,
Yeah.
they need education. See, this is what goes on. You've got Harold Collins has this Do the Right Thing, WRITE, and he's got Amy Wyrick in charge of the program as it deals with black kids in Memphis, not Shelby County, which is a travesty. So it's a little way to change money. See, this town's got lots of money, but the money goes to certain interests. Why this town doesn't do more for itself is there are 5 fields where all the money goes: real estate acquisition, real estate management, real estate development, construction, and construction material supply. The scam is come up with something that the city will build at taxpayers' expense, so these 5 fields get all the money. And we get nothing. And since the tax base here is not based on income tax, which is graduated according to income, it's on food tax, sales tax, well, sales tax for food,
Yes, sir.
sales tax, property tax. Most of the property owners in Memphis are black, so we are putting up most of the money into the city accounts, but the city gives our money away. Like Beale Street Landing, that thing down there at the end of Beale Street, they opened up summer 2014. It's got a giant catfish jungle gym, but it's a bar, grill, and gift shop. So the city takes $35 million of our money, and what they wind up doing is they build it for an entrepreneur. He doesn't have to put a dime up. His deal with the city is pay them $1 a year in rent and 4% of his net profit. Well, he bailed on it, so now we've got a white elephant. The city can't operate a bar. It was supposed to be to bring in tourism. They set up there in Beale Street Development. It's really a farce. These people pay on a primary lease to the city about $250 a month. The leases have been up for 30-some years. Instead of the city confiscating those leases under eminent domain,
yes, sir.
and then releasing the areas, the properties, to people who are actually running clubs with maybe $3,000 or $4,000 or $5,000 a month of rent that goes to the city, they won't do that. So the sub-lessees are paying $5,000, $10,000, $15,000, $30,000, $35,000 a month for the lease to the primary leaseholders that are only paying $250 a month to the city. So see, it's a racket.
Well, let me ask you. We've had 2 African American men as mayors in the city that were mayors prior to Strickland. This was going on throughout their tenure, I'm sure.
Well, it's not actually. I can't speak for AC because although he's a former law partner, I was in LA for most of the time. Doing my thing, still kept my house and voting registration.
Do you think
here.
that Mr. Warden,
I don't know what he was doing, but let me say this about Dr. Harrington. Dr. Harrington was getting thwarted. One of the reasons he got such bad PR about him trying to take money and, see he's crooked, he wasn't. What he was doing was straightening out the corruption.
Yes, sir.
They didn't like that.
Yes, sir.
Now, Doc was making a lot of money being on boards of directors, 3 or 4 times, 5 times or so what he was making as mayor. So he didn't need to do that. He was an honest man. He just didn't take any crap from anybody.
Yes, sir.
Now, to give you an example of what type of stuff he broke up, when you go over the A.W. Willis Bridge next to the pyramid to get to the Mud Island development, there's a roundabout now. At one point, back in the late 80s, there was a road over, a stop sign, and a right angle turn. The city sold that corner with that stop sign to a private developer for $14,600 I'm informed. Within 3 months, he sold it back to the city for $6.3 million. And everybody got money under the table. By state law, when you have a development, if it's of a certain population density, there's a certain minimum width for the streets. The developer is required to donate part of his land for the street widening and pay for the street construction himself. What we did here is we exercised eminent domain, took the strip, paid the developer instead of him having to donate it, and the city built the roadway instead of the developer having to do it.
Okay.
And the same thing with that around. Money got paid, but that wasn't Doc. He was trying to stop that.
Yes. Well, I didn't want to insinuate, and I was not insinuating that they allowed corruption. My question was basically that I know it just didn't start.
Oh, it didn't start. It's been a long time.
Right. So were there things that our African American mayors could have done or done more?
Well, see, the mayor, you have to understand this. The county mayor, to a great extent, and the city mayor to a lesser extent, don't really have power the way the governmental structure is.
Okay.
Most of the power is vested in the city council.
City council. Okay.
Now, the way the city council used to operate until fairly recently was money under the table. They didn't pay them much. So most of the construction material supply, real estate acquisition management and development depending upon zoning ordinances. So what would happen is when somebody was trying to sneak through a zoning variance for the benefit of these big 5 entities,
yes, sir.
I don't know entities, but categories,
yes,
they would come up with crackdown on adult entertainment, raid topless places, stuff like that is a cover. But if you paid attention, the money was transferring under the table that way. So, for example, if you had let's say a hardware store, you sold hardwood flooring supplies, you'd get a big order from the city. You'd get the check, but no hardwood would change hands. If you were the deacon on a deacon board on Pastor's Appreciation Week, whatever, or if you were the pastor of a church, there would be a large cash donation anonymously in an envelope marked out to that deacon or that pastor. See?
Yes, sir.
So the money would come that way. Certain city councilmen used to make a habit of charging their constituents $250 an hour to talk to them. You see, that's how they used to run that game.
Keep the money going.
Now, when Doc got elected in 1991, they tried to cheat him. See, Swearingen, Judge Swearingen and I.
That first election is when Harold Ford found the votes.
No, that's a long time ago. That's back in '74 when he ran for
Congress. No. If my memory serves me correctly,
he didn't have anything to do with it. I was there.
What I was saying is that when Doc got elected,
Harold Ford had nothing to do with it.
He didn't have anything to do with that.
I was there.
Okay.
What happened is, see, under Tennessee law, or at least at that time, you could ask a circuit, chancery, or criminal court judge to be an official observer.
Okay.
Harrington's campaign got me and Swearingen. Swearingen and I went over there. What was going on is they claimed they lost the recorded record of the vote count from those machines.
Okay.
But they had recorded them piecemeal, and they were showing that Doc was losing by about 90 some votes. Well, this janitor walked up to Judge Swearingen and I and said, "You gentlemen looking for something about them votes?" I said, "Yes, sir, we are." They got them on one of them shiny discs, what they call them CDs.
Yeah.
Say, they put it in that second drawer, that disc right over there. So we went and got these people and said, "All right, open this desk." So now, if you say that you just misplaced it, that's all right. Otherwise, we both called our bailiffs up, had them over there in uniform. If we get anything funny, place them under arrest for election fraud.
Wow.
So when we didn't realize it must have slipped in this drawer. So it wound up Doc won by 124 votes. See, they were trying to steal that election too. They used to do it routinely. When they put those deballed machines in, they could easily do it because there's no firewall security or anything.
Okay.
Once you hack them, by the way, they stay hacked, and all you got to do is use a certain code, which you can put in by just a smartphone with that text function I was telling you
Yes,
about.
sir. Yes, sir.
And you can forever dictate the election. It's what you call differential vote counts. You simply put in what percentage you want the people to have.
Okay.
You know, let's say I want my client candidate to win by 52%.
You could actually control that with the app.
So they will put extra candidate numbers in the machines and divide the stuff back and forth. Now, one of the sure ways of telling, and it came out in my race, is on write-in votes, which they try to do. There's one person, two people, three people, 5, 10, 100, 127. But you can't have a fraction of a person. You can tell there's fraud going on when you notice that the write-in vote will have point something of a person.
Yes, sir.
So that's
why is there no federal laws that
that's
mandate
why
them
the
not using these
feds
machines?
gave the money to Shelby County in 2008.
Okay, but I mean, giving them money, is that the same as a mandate that you're not supposed to
They
use those
can't
machines?
do
You better
that,
not
but
be-
it's like you say, you guys got a corruption problem. You're the Democratic Party. You're the ones that are getting victimized, and here we go. We're going to pay for this. All you got to do is have we, the below signed county commissioners, do hereby resolve to replace the D-ball voting machines and sign off. That's all you need. But you can't do that, and you got 3 holdouts every time it comes up for the last 9 years who won't go for it. And then somebody 3 years ago was talking about it'll cost 500,000 to keep me in, to put me in the mayor's race or to keep me out. So he didn't get in the race, but look at what happened to get Strickland in. You got 5 blacks running against each other, against the incumbent.
Yeah.
Strickland slips in.
That's been a tool they've used for years.
Yeah, but it's gotten ridiculous now.
Yeah.
And you see the thing.
I think that layman's terms we would call it splitting the vote.
Okay, and now what happened with let's say the latest fiasco with the Democratic Party? All right, they had a problem with a certain young man that was the chairman. Okay, he's no longer the chair. He resigned under a cloud. But then when they came around to get a replacement, they wound up getting a guy that's a lieutenant on the sheriff's department.
Okay.
Now, he does not know how to run a meeting. He knows no parliamentary procedure. He does not know the bylaws. Nobody does. And he is the subordinate for a Republican elected sheriff.
Okay.
So he's going to be the Democratic Party chair in his job that he gets to pay his house note, car note, food, take care of all of his business with, is subject to the whim of a person from the opposite party. That's a built-in disaster.
Amazing.
The woman they had before that, she worked for one of the hospitals, and they frankly didn't like it, so they were running her back and forth and around and about. So we have not even any effective political leadership.
I want to turn the corner a minute, Judge, and ask you briefly. You were presiding, correct me if I'm wrong,
James Earl Ray,
of the appeal.
It wasn't an appeal. What they call it is a post-conviction relief proceeding when your appeals have run out. Now, here's the basis. Ray had filed all sorts of appellate proceedings to overturn his conviction. First, you have to understand, he never confessed. Never confessed. And in the transcript of the proceedings where he was sentenced, the judge admonishes him 3 times to sit down. Mr. Ray, you have to sit down. But Your Honor, I never said I killed Dr. King. I'm just pleading guilty, not confessing. I'm pleading guilty under Alford. Now, there's an old case called Alford versus North Carolina that says you may plead guilty even if you're actually innocent. If you think doing so is in your best interest, and you do so freely, voluntarily, understandingly, knowingly, advisedly, and intelligently
Mhm.
with advice of counsel, and the state has a reasonable factual basis upon which to otherwise proceed. Now, here's the problem. When they got to me, he had tried every one of the rest of them, except the state had no factual basis on which to proceed other than his entry of a guilty plea.
Okay.
The only real evidence the state had was the rifle.
Right.
It's a Remington 760 Game Master, caliber 30-06.